Okay, so our subject is the financial crisis. How we got in?
It seems not everybody is interested about this.
Why is this all that you have?
Almost.
Almost, okay.
This is how we get out.
Yeah, we see how you will get out of the show. Okay, so how will we proceed? We'll first start with the definition. Of the word crisis. Then the Austrian explanation of the current crisis. So talking first a little bit about the Austrian business cycle theory. And then about destabilizing stabilization policies. So number 3 would be how to get out of the crisis, and number 4, how to create a Great Depression. Just to complement this. Okay, so we start with the definition of the crisis. A crisis is a situation in which there is an extraordinarily large number of business failures due to bad investment decisions. Okay, business failure is a situation in which a company goes bankrupt, becomes insolvent. So in an economic crisis, we have an extraordinarily large number of crises, or of business failures, of bankruptcies. The word to underline in this definition is extraordinary, because it is normal that businesses fail. Right? The market economy is the profit and loss economy. It's not a profit economy, although some believe that it's the for-profit only economy. You know, the financial markets, as we will explain, indeed we have this phenomenon that the market has become a for-profit only economy. Right? A healthy market economy is characterized by trial and error. Good companies, good business ideas can be perpetuated because they turn out profits. Bad business ideas have to be discontinued because they create losses and capital consumption. And it is essential for a market economy that businesses, bad businesses, go bankrupt, because the most scarce things that we have in a market economy is capital. Otherwise, in other words, accumulated savings. So this is a story that we discussed this morning. Savings are absolutely essential for economic growth and for economic prosperity. If we eat up our savings, then we impoverish ourselves in the medium and in the long run. In the short run, we have a great time with the party, right? We consume more. It's the fisherman, right? He no longer repairs his net. He just lays on the beach or on the grass. He enjoys himself. He consumes more. But eventually he becomes poorer than he otherwise would have been because he has consumed his capital. So we can make this choice consciously. We can impoverish ourselves consciously by just eating up our savings. But we can also do this unintentionally. Most businesses that are set up to create profits, not to create losses. And some businesses are set up to create losses. This is what we call a fraudulent entrepreneur, right? Or a pseudo entrepreneur. Some businesses just are there to defraud investors into handing money over to the fraudulent entrepreneur, and he then walks away once he has spent all the money on his friends and himself. Right? But most businesses, they go bankrupt unintentionally. Right? The entrepreneur at the point of time when he set up the business was firmly convinced that this business is a viable one, and eventually it was wrong. Not a big deal, right? So he did something wrong. He probably won't find many more people in the future who hand over money to him, or less, right? Less. And he has less money to waste, and that's a good thing. Right? So the market economy hands over ever more money into the hands of successful entrepreneurs and takes money away, takes capital away from unsuccessful entrepreneurs. And that's of course exactly how it should be. Right? If our major aim is to preserve the capital stock, the stock of accumulated savings, that's how it should be. So it's normal that in any given year a certain number of firms go bankrupt. In France, for example, it's every year between 30 and 35,000 companies before the crisis, right, that went bankrupt. But at the same time, every single year, 30 to 35,000 companies are being established. Okay. Each day, 15,000 jobs get lost. Each day, 15,000 jobs are being created. Right? So that, of course, there's some permanent layer of unemployment. It's not always the same persons who are unemployed. Always different persons who are unemployed. Those persons looking for a job. Okay? So this is what Schumpeter called the process of creative destruction. Right? Bad ideas get weeded out, good ideas are being kept. So in a crisis, we have an extraordinary large number of companies that go bankrupt. Why is this so? Why is this sudden peak in wrong investment, in wrong investment decision making? So this is the question of crisis. So a crisis, in other words, is characterized by a cluster of errors. That's the technical term, a cluster of errors. And the major challenge for business cycle theory is to explain the cluster of errors. Why is it that at some point of time exceptionally more errors than usual are being made? What is the Austrian explanation, or what are the Austrian explanations of clusters of errors? One important element is the so-called Austrian theory of the business cycle that most of you have probably encountered because you are all studying with the same usual suspects of professors here. Who has not studied with Professor Nava or Professor...
Who has not studied?
Not, yeah. Not. Okay. Who has not heard of the Austrian business cycle theory? Thank you. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Good. So I'm not talking just in vain. You're my public. So the Austrian theory of the business cycle, also called the monetary theory of the business cycle, was developed was first presented by Ludwig von Mises in 1912 in his book The Theory of Money and Credit. Theorie des Geldes und der Umlaufsmittel. So translated into English 34, it's still in print. And it was further elaborated by Friedrich von Hayek at the beginning of the 1930s and throughout the 1930s. And for example, in his book Prices and Production. And then further refined by later Austrian economists, for example, by Murray Rothbard or Jesus Huerta de Soto. But the chief idea, the central idea, has remained the same from Mises' day. The central idea is the following. We can illustrate it with a biblical example. Let's suppose we want to build a couple of towers. And to build the towers, we have building materials, in particular bricks. So So this is a huge heap of bricks. It's huge. Man is here. He is small. He doesn't oversee really how many bricks there are. But if he uses them wisely, he can build 3 towers or 3 houses. Now it's clear that the number of houses of this type that he can construct is limited by the building material. He can create maybe 6 houses that are half as high or something like that, or 12 or 1.5, even higher, higher. But there's only so and so much we can do. Right? That the laborers can do with this building material. Now, what happens if the brick increases, the size of the heap increases? Well, we can add a 4th tower. Okay. And this is fine. With more material available, we can build a 4th tower. Now, if we don't go wisely about this, but if we overestimate the amount of building material available, we might set out differently. We might not set out to build 4 towers, but we might set out to build 6 towers. So we lay the foundations for 6 towers. This is the evangelical example of the bad building master, right, who sets out the foundations of too many towers. Right? And at the moment when he sets out to build the foundations, that's fine. He doesn't recognize this error because there's enough building material there for the foundations for 6 buildings, but not to complete them. Right? So we go out and raise the walls, and then we get stuck at some point. Because there's simply not material available. We need to stop what we started. We cannot possibly complete all that we started, but we can only complete a part of this. So clearly what we need to do now is to discontinue a few of these processes and try to convert the building material that has been used here in the other buildings and try to complete them. So in my example here, we can then complete 3 towers and not 4, because by converting these bricks that have been used here, we are breaking some of them, we're destroying some of them. So we cannot actually do as much as we could have done if we had, from the outset, been entirely correct about creating the number of foundations that are higher. So what we can illustrate with this simple example is the crucial distinction between the number of projects that we realize and the number of projects that we can complete. It's of course something that we know from common sense, and that probably your parents repeat to you once a year or once a week, depending on some do it once a day. Concentrate yourself, don't get distracted, don't do too many things at the same time. Right? Focus on what you can do and achieve. It's very important in life. Right? It's also the opposite danger, right? That you only focus and you never do anything else. Right? So it's the opposite danger. But so it's the right balance. But in any case, we need to focus in order to achieve, otherwise we will not. So this distinction between the number of projects that we start and the number of projects that we actually realize, that we complete, is at the heart of this Austrian business cycle theory. What Mises says is the following. There is on the free market, an unhampered market, that's unhampered by government interventions, there is a tendency for entrepreneurs to have a relatively small proportion of wrong business decisions. Okay, some projects are not viable, we don't do them. But by and large, we never make this one error, which consists in overestimating the amount of resources that are available from the aggregate point of view. And the reason why this is so is because all investment projects have to match up to a common hurdle, to a common point of comparison, which is the interest rate. And so we have here the capital market, we have here supply of capital and the demand for capital. And so we get an interest rate here, somewhere. Of course, in the real world, it's not this one interest rate, right? Because it's the one pure rate of interest, but we don't know, need to go into these difficulties, right? And on this, at this interest rate, all savings that are available are being exchanged and are being invested. So the savings are invested only in the supposedly most profitable business ventures. Okay. All others that promise to return, to have a lower return, will not get realized because the entrepreneurs that have the most profitable businesses, they can always outbid the other entrepreneurs that also need capital. Okay? Now what happens if savings increase? Well, if savings increase, the supply of savings increases, and we get a new equilibrium at a lower interest rate, and at a greater volume of savings. So there's more savings available. So more projects will now get financed. More projects can be completed. Why? Because more real stuff has been saved. Right? The real savings have increased. So we can sustain workers for a longer period, or more workers for the same period, or the same workers under more pleasant conditions, higher wages and so on, during the same process. And this, so we can realize additional projects, and this is reflected by the way that the interest rate, here in our example, is lower. And in the real world, it's not necessarily absolutely lower, but it's always lower than it would otherwise have been. Okay? So the hurdle that each investment project now needs to take is lower. Right? So more projects get realized. So the economy grows. Before we had created 3 towers, now we can create 4 towers. Things are different if this increase of the supply of capital does not result from increased savings, that is from an increased renunciation to consumption, but from an increased money production. It happens when central banks or commercial banks increase the amount of money tickets that they lend out. So it would, for example, be the case if a central bank pursues a policy of quantitative easing. Right? They increase the money supply by 1/3, right? And loan this money out, thereby diminishing the interest rate below the level it would otherwise have been reached. Now the point is, we get one phenomenon that is very similar to a genuine increase of savings, namely the reduced interest rate. So the hurdle becomes lower that all investment projects need to take. Now there are more investment projects that can take that hurdle. So more entrepreneurs jump. More investment projects are being started. But the difference is that this time, it's not real savings that have been increased, but all we have done is to increase the money supply. It's not more consumer goods are now available to sustain the workers during a prolonged production period, or to engage more workers in a greater number of projects. It's not the case. We just have printed more money. And as a consequence, so entrepreneurs start building up additional projects, but there are not enough real resources available from an aggregate point of view to complete them all. So sooner or later, it must come to an economic crisis. It must come to the point of time when entrepreneurs realize, well, we don't have the stuff needed to complete all this stuff. We don't have the building material. We don't have the raw materials. We don't have the intermediate products. We don't have all the workers that we need to get these things done. So what do they do then? Well, they start bidding up the prices of these scarce resources, of the some bricks that are still left in the market. They're starting bidding up their price. So their costs increase, and the increase of costs squeezes away profits, and in some cases, lead to losses. Okay? So that's when companies go bankrupt. That's the moment of the crisis. Now, in Austrian business cycle theory, the moment of crisis is actually the best part about this whole boom-bust sequence. Because at the moment of crisis, before we realize that we've done something wrong, during the boom phase, when we started all the additional projects that were not really viable, we thought we were rich, but we were not really, we were just stupid. We were silly. Right? So we were wasting capital. It's only as from the point of time that we realized, well, that was all wrong. We cannot do all of this that we've started, and then things start getting better. We realize, wow, we are really in deep shit. Right? We've done something really silly. We've impoverished ourselves. But from that point of time, things get better. And they start getting better because people now start converting the resources that they've invested in the least viable projects into the projects that can be completed. So what does this mean? Here we have the figurative example, but in the real world then it would mean we fire people, because these companies close doors, they shut their doors, fire people. They sell their buildings, they sell machines that they've used, they sell the stocks of intermediate goods, of raw materials that they've bought.
They are lucky to sell.
Yeah, of course, it doesn't always work, right? So, as we have said before, in this case, right, sometimes you just break the stuff, or it's not, it's too specific, right? You have a specific machine, you cannot reconvert it at all. Right? It's a net loss, right? But you can use always the people that have worked there, they can execute some other work, you can use raw materials, you can use many intermediate products, and so on, you can use them somewhere else, and so you complete these other projects. Okay? So this is, in very rough terms, the Austrian business cycle theory. It's a theory of the boom-bust sequence in which the boom is truly an illusionary period. It's not a period of artificial growth. That's sometimes how it's been characterized. The economy is overheating, it's growing too fast. This is not strictly speaking correct. Entrepreneurs believe that they are creating more. People in the economy believe the economy is working well, but it's really an illusion. It's a collective illusion. People are wasting capital and they're not aware of it. It's like when you burn your furniture in order to heat the living room. You think, wow, this is a great new technique of heating the home, right? And then maybe because you're drunk or something, it's a solution. It's very similar in boom theory. Right? People do all this nasty things and don't even realize that they do these silly things. And then so you have the moment of crisis, when they realize that they've done something wrong, and it's not a theoretical consideration, some intellectual exercise that brings them to this conclusion, but it's nasty losses, bankruptcies, bankers no longer extending credits, suppliers no longer furnishing goods, customers no longer buying. So nasty losses that provide the reality check, and then entrepreneurs start adjusting, abandoning the bad old ways and focusing on what can be done. So this is the Austrian business cycle theory, and it clearly applies to all situations in which central banks in particular pursue a policy of diminishing interest rates to an artificially low level. And clearly this is the policy that central banks have been pursued again and again, in the past century. Right? Now, let's just consider the two last big crises. The crisis following the dot-com boom in the second half of the 1990s. There was a phase two, right, where central banks kept interest rates at a very low level. So lots of investment projects became suddenly viable, apparently viable. They were not viable before. So this whole frenzy of investing in technological companies that didn't even have a single product, but it was a dot-com company. Right? So people were crazy about this. People putting money into this, and ultimately it could not be done. The real resources needed to complete all these processes were simply not there. So sooner or later we had to come to the point of realization that it doesn't work. That happened in 2002, 2001. And the recent crisis too, right, is the result, certainly among other things, of a policy of systematically decreasing the interest rates as from the end of 2002. Paul Krugman, the famous Keynesian economist, called in 2002 in various op-eds that he wrote called upon the central bank to create a real estate boom. He said, wow, now the stock market has collapsed, aggregate demand is shrinking. We are in the worst of all cases. We need to prevent that the economy collapses in an inflationary spiral. You guys need to do something. Create a boom. Do something. Create a real estate boom. Decrease interest rates, slash interest rates so that people can buy houses, right? And therefore prop up real estate values and so on. And this way feel richer and spend more on consumers' goods and so on. And exactly as the Grand Master spoke, so it happened. Right? The Federal Reserve decreased interest rates quite substantially. The Euro system followed, but not quite as much as the Federal Reserve system, so they created an artificial boom, especially in the real estate market. And this too collapsed in 2007, when it became obvious that it's not sufficient to grant a mortgage just to any living being, right? I mean, some were considering handing out mortgages to dogs and cats, something that is breathing, has a warm body, give it a credit, right? Also the money we spend. That's not sufficient, right? You had all these fantastic stories about nurses in New York City having a monthly income of $2,000, and they had each of them 3 or 4 houses of $400,000 and $500,000, and all of it serving on the little revenue. And how could they do this? Well, because property prices were constantly increasing, they could take out ever new credits on the increasing value of their wealth. Right? They were ever richer every single month almost, so they could take out more credits, and with these new credits serve the old debt. Capitalism the American way. Right? And so it was clear that this, sooner or later, had to end. Right? This is not a sustainable situation. It's precisely the situation envisioned by the Austrian scenario. Okay. Then there's a second element that we can add. This is an element that doesn't work in a boom-bust sequence, but it's more of a structural mechanism. In particular, monetary interventionism, even if it pursues the agenda of stabilizing the economy, has the ultimate effect of destabilizing the same economy, of fragilizing the economy. So what I explained to you now is how monetary interventionism, long-standing monetary interventionism, not since 2005, not since 2000, but at least since 1971, the current fiat money standard, has created incentives for market participants to behave in a way that is, from an aggregate point of view, disruptive. Okay, so let's consider this. So we have monetary stabilization, or stabilization policy. The European Central Bank has the mission of stabilizing the inflation rate in the Eurozone between 0 and 2%. Now we step over all questions of measuring the inflation rate and the fact that it's never really 0%, it's around 2%, and sometimes even more than 2%, we get all of us. So the mission is to stabilize the inflation rate. And the question is, how do central banks do this? And the answer is very simple. They do this by influencing the money supply. They're operating on the principle that we call the quantity theory of money. The higher the money supply, the higher tends to be the price level. The lower the money supply, the lower tends to be the price level. Okay, very simple. So if the price level exceeds 2%, our policymakers in Frankfurt will try to reduce the money supply. And if the price level drops below 0, and in practice also even if it drops substantially below 1%, they will try to prop up money production. The second thing to realize is that most of the money is not actually produced by the central banks themselves, but by commercial banks. Before the crisis, about 90% of the money supply that determines the price level was being created by the commercial banks. Today it's a little less, it's something like 70%, around 70%, but it's still much larger than the share that actually is produced by central banks. So the point is that in order to stabilize the price level, central banks have to influence the banking sector, because the banks actually produce most of the money. So they have to need to make sure that the banks don't produce too much money, but also not enough. How do they prevent the banks from producing too much money? Well, by raising interest rates on refinancing operations, and also by regulating banks. Right? The banking industry, the financial industry more generally, is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world. And sometimes by reading the financial press, you would never get this impression. Right? You get the impression that the last sector where free-roaming cowboys, entrepreneurs, ride along, disturbed by nobody on the ferry. It's just themselves, the rock individualism and so on. But in actual fact, it's a very heavily regulated, regimented industry. Second only to the health sector, probably. Very strongly regulated. And the ultimate purpose of these regulations is to prevent that banks produce too much money. Banks have an incentive to create more money because that's how they earn interest income. Okay. But central banks also need to make sure that banks do not produce enough money. And such a situation can occur in particular if banks go bankrupt. If a bank goes bankrupt, then all the money that it has created evaporates overnight. What is the money that a bank creates? Well, it's demand deposits, right? Side accounts, which people use with the help of checks that they write and also with credit cards. So let's say a major bank goes bankrupt, Citibank or so, then the next day nobody will accept anymore a credit card issued by Citibank, or will accept anymore a check drawn on a Citibank account. And so all the money that the bank has created becomes as if it didn't exist. It evaporates. Now this exercises, of course, pressure, deflationary pressure on the price level, decreases revenues of companies, and if revenue decreases, then if a company is indebted, this might very quickly lead to bankruptcy of the company. Right? So we get what economists call spillover effects or domino effect. Right? The bankruptcy of a major bank entails the bankruptcy of other companies and thereby indirectly of other banks. So it spills over the economy. And the more banks go bankrupt, right, if other banks go bankrupt, then the same process is reinforced. It's like a spiral. It's a deflationary spiral that reinforces itself. Okay. And that, of course, is the opposite of monetary stability, according to the Euro system. So how do the central banks go about preventing this? Well, ultimately it's very simple. We have observed it, everybody has seen it in the past 3 years again and again, right? It's by bailing out banks. It's very simple. Bailing out banks. How can you bail out a bank? Excuse me?
Give money.
Yeah, how do you give money to the bank?
Loans.
Thanks for giving this answer. That's the wrong answer.
Incorrect.
Yeah. So the point is precisely you cannot bail out a bankrupt bank or any other bankrupt firm for that matter through more loans. And so we look at the principle of the balance sheet.
You do it by robbery.
A robbery?
Yes, you rob the mothers and you put it into the bank.
Did somebody show up at your home to rob you?
It's not that way, it's a soft rob. stubborn.
Okay, stop.
Because, you know, I wanted to ask a question before we go into this clarification.
Yeah.
I understand what is happening with the money that banks are creating. And this is clear to me. But what is happening with the money that are created by people like me, you, and others, and entrusted to the banks? Because these money are not created by the banks, are created by me, by you, she, and are just entrusted to the banks. To be a little
If you pay money to an account at the bank, what happens to this? Well, the bank lends it out further.
Or I make a deposit,
Yeah, the bank lends it out. But I mean, what you deposit is actually what is called, that is base money. That is the money that is being produced by central banks. Okay? Right? So that's what you deposit into the bank. And the bank then creates, based on this, it creates new accounts.
I see.
It actually uses the base money only to make payments. If customers ask for base money, banks actually don't want to use base money because the less payments it has to make, the more accounts it can create. So the more interest it can run.
Now it's clear.
So, this is the balance sheet. This is the active side. Oh, this is not French, it's English. Active, passive side. Actually, it's called the assets and liabilities, but I'll do it this way, it doesn't matter. So this is the list of wealth that we own. We have a list of all our assets, all physical things that we own, also some material things that we own, patents and so on. And our cash balance. Here we have, on the passive side, on the liability side, we have all the rights pertaining to the wealth owned by the company. So who owns all of these things here? Well, it's our creditors who have loaned money to us, given a credit to us. And its equity is our own money. Okay? Now, let's say that the company goes, or we take a numerical example. We take a numerical example. Let's say this is 95, this is 5, we have here 10, and 90. Okay. Now the bank discovers it has made bad investment decisions. Why is that? Because actually it finds out that what it thought was worth 95 is only worth 70. It's a bank that is invested somewhere, and it will never see the 95 again, it will only see 70 again. It can sell it only for 70. So all of the assets that it owns are worth then 75. 70 in financial titles and 5 in cash. Now it has debt of 90. Translation, it owns no more equity. Not only it owns no more equity, it cannot even pay back all of the debt. Right? This here is, so to say, this is the surplus that remains after you deduct your liabilities from everything that you own. Right? So this is your equity. It's something that remains. It's a residual position in the balance sheet. So, right, so we also have to correct this here from 90 to 75. So this is a bankrupt company. What can we do to prevent bankruptcy? What can a central bank do? It cannot follow your first reflex of extending a credit. Let's say the central bank gives a credit of 50 to this company. What will happen? This year will move from 5 to 55. Okay, so total balance sheet will be 125. But our debt would move from 90 to 145. So we still cannot pay back all our debt. Right? So first lesson to learn, you cannot save a bankrupt company with more credit. It's not possible. Right? Never works. Okay.
Let me try another answer.
Okay.
The state, for example, buys the distressed assets or guarantees them so that their value rises once again.
Very good. That works. And that's exactly what they've done on a massive scale. So they've done the following thing. They have created an artificial market for the assets. On the free market, these assets were worth 70. But now comes the government or some government agent, for example, the central bank, and buys them up for 95 or even for more. And that's what the central bank in Europe has done, for example, by buying up all Greek government debt at nominal value, right? So let's say these were Greek government debt financial titles on the balance sheet of this bank. They were not worth 95. I mean, on the market, they were worth maybe, let's say, 30. Now comes the central bank and says, well, we are accepting them as a deposit at face value. Okay, so it's a hidden subsidy. It's a huge gift, courtesy of the central bank. That is currently ultimately buying this. Okay, it's the first thing that they did. That's what they did in Europe. In the US, they did something even more impressive. Namely, they swapped the assets. This is something that no normal person understands the word swap, but it means exchange. Right? And then, too, it was a gift, right? So the banks have all these toxic assets, that is, assets that aren't worth a dime, on their balance sheet that own this. They have bought subprime mortgage-backed securities. Now the central bank comes along and says, look, I will take these assets at their face value of 95 and exchange them, swap them, for treasury bonds, United States government treasury bonds of the same face value. So again, it's a blatant subsidy, it's a gift, courtesy of a public institution. Right? So that's one thing that you can do, and that has been used massively. And the other thing that you can do is to pay money into the bank as an owner. That is, you partly or entirely nationalize the bank. And if the government pays 55 units of money, 55 million or 50 million into the company not as a credit, but as a co-owner, then of course it's possible to bring the company back into the green figures, into the black figures. Okay? So that's what you do. That's what they have done since 2008. So that's how central banks stabilize, not only in theory, but in practice, the banking sector, and thereby stabilize the price level. The problem is that this policy is known by everybody and therefore creates what economists call a moral hazard. It is the temptation, the incentive to rob other people, right? To rely on other people's money against their will. The commercial banks know that the central banks pursue this mission of stabilizing the money supply, stabilizing the price level. They know, therefore, that the central banks will do everything to prevent a meltdown of the banking industry. So if something goes wrong, then they know, well, central banks will bail us out, either in this form or another. Especially if we are big enough, if our failure, so that our failure could create spillover effects, where this trouble for other market participants. If a very small financial firm goes bankrupt, you don't care. If a very small bank goes bankrupt, you let it go bankrupt. If a big bank goes bankrupt, you come in, you bail it out. And the problem is today that you cannot determine scientifically what is the critical size of a company that is too big to fail, that is too big so that its failure would create spillover effects on others. What we know is that this critical size diminishes. Right? The more and the longer you stabilize the banking industry, right, as we'll see in a minute, right, the more fragile commercial banks become, the smaller is the minimum size that can create trouble for the industry as a whole. So, banks know that they will be bailed out. So, therefore, they have less incentives to make precautions on their own to protect them for the possible occurrence of adverse events. How do companies protect themselves? There are two positions in the balance sheet that are our bumpers. Like in a car, right? You have the bumper, the amortisseur, right? It protects us against holes in the street and so on, makes the ride smooth. And the bumpers of economic life are equity and cash. We need to have enough cash in order to meet unforeseen payments that we need to make. There's maybe, there's a payment that we need to make, a liability that needs to be served and so on. If we don't have enough cash in our cash balance, then we need to sell something of our assets. We have to maybe sell it under adverse circumstances, so we sell it under its value and so on. Right? So therefore we need to have enough cash. We need to have enough equity in order to absorb possible losses. Normal companies, small, medium-sized companies, operate with 40% and up of equity. Right? There are many small companies that have no debt at all. The larger our equity, the more unlikely is our default. Even if we have very large losses, we are always in a position to pay back our debt. Right? But of course our equity is very small. Then the likelihood that we go bankrupt and that the smallest unforeseen negative event occurs is of course greater. Now a bank that can count on the assistance of the central bank has the moral hazard to reduce its equity as much as possible. Why? Because of something that we call the leverage effect. We're not all economists here, right? Leverage effect is not known. Okay, so it's important. So let's take a numerical example. If your gross profit, the interest rate, debt service, capital invested, debt service, net profit, return on capital, return on equity. Still, okay. Interest rate, debt. I've got everything. So our objective is not to study the impact of ever greater debt on the return on equity. That is, on the amount of money that the entrepreneur earns on the money that he himself has invested. Okay? So let's say the overall capital for this, in order to make the comparison easy, we say that the overall amount invested is always the same as 100 units of money. $100 million or $100 billion euros or whatever. Let's also say the gross profit earned through these operations is the same. Always 10 units of money. And let's also say that the interest rate is always the same, always 5%. So the return on capital is now defined by the relationship between gross profit and capital invested. Alright, so we earn here 10% because we have 10 units of money that we earn on 100 units of money that we have invested. Okay. So the return on capital is always 10%. Now, we can finance these investments either with our own money, or with money that we loan out from other people, or with a combination of the two. So, first scenario, we have no debt at all. Right? Debt is 0. And so we pay 5% on 0, is also 0. So the net profit is equal to gross profit, 10 units of money. Net profit is equal to gross profit minus debt service. Okay. So 10. So therefore the return on equity is also 10%. Next scenario, we suppose that we finance half of our investment through debt. 50 units of money come from our pocket, 50% we loan out from others. So we pay 5% on 50, so it's 2.5 units of money. That is, our net profit is now 7.5. The return on capital earned is still 10%, but now the return on equity is 7.5 divided by 50, so it is 15%. Very interesting. We've not become smarter, our product is the same, customers still pay the same thing for it, but we earn more on our own money, simply by going into debt. What's the secret? Well, the secret is that the interest rate that we pay on our debt is lower than our return on capital. As long as that is the case, we have this leverage effect. That is called the leverage effect. That is, it multiplies the return on our own money. As soon as the interest rate becomes higher than our own gross return, the leverage effect operates in the opposite direction. That is, our losses are multiplied. But here we are just looking on the good side, because banks don't have to worry about losses. Big Brother is watching them. So we're just looking at profits. Next scenario, we suppose that that is 95%. So we pay 5% on 95. Or is it not 95? Let's take 90. It's easier to calculate, so it's 4.5.
75.
Say it again?
On 95, it was.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so this is easier. Let's say this here. So we have 5.5 units of money net profit, 5.5 divided by how much equity. We have only 10 units of money equity, 90 come from other people. So we have 55% return. We get warm. Our heart warms. Business gets interesting after all. Yeah. And now let's consider something 99% debt. Who would be so stupid to go 99% into debt and have only 1% equity? Well, actually, there are people who do this, there are institutions who do this, and I tell you another thing, all of them are public banks. Okay? All of them are public banks. Standard examples are the big mortgage corporations and the public mortgage corporations in the US, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and in Germany, the so-called Landesbank, right? So public banks owned by regional governments. 1%. 1% equity. Again, we remind ourselves, what is the purpose of equity? It's to act as a buffer. If we make a wrong business decision, we don't want to get blown away, right? So that all losses eat up all our own money, so we get bankrupt. Of course, if we are a business genius, and we never make an investment error, then we don't need equity. And so it appears that people, once they were in public office, elected politicians, they are in government, they are too stupid to reform the postal system. But as soon as they get appointed to a public bank, they walk over the step of the bank, turn around, and have become a genius. Because they no more make any errors. They operate like angels with 1% of equity. And this is the empirical confirmation that the neoclassical model of perfect foresight has some application. That's all geniuses. Okay, so what happens here? So we have a debt service of roughly 5, right? Net profit therefore of 5. And this 5, we earn it now on 1 unit of money invested out of our own pocket, that is 500%. Yeah, that's interesting business. Yeah? And now you understand where the bonuses come from. If you ever wondered where all these billions of bonuses come from, all these business geniuses, how they do this, you get the illustration. It's all leveraged. They're all leveraged until under the roof. So they earn huge returns on the little money, well, on the 2 or 3 billions that they invest themselves. And they can therefore pay a lot of money to all the people who help them doing this. But again, so the question is, it's wrong if we focus just on the bonuses and say that the banks are bandits and so on. And it's true, in a way they are. But the relevant question is, why can they do this? What allows them to do this? Well, it's the policy of bailing them out. Policy of bailing them out gives them incentives to reduce their liquidity to virtually zero, reduce their equity to virtually zero, and look for very risky investments that have very high return. Right? Because if we can get beyond 10% of return on capital, if we operate with 20% on return on capital, then it has a corresponding impact on the return of equity also. Okay? So, a policy of bailing out banks creates incentives for behavior that is perfectly rational from an individual point of view. The banks, each individual bank, each financial company that reduces liquidity and reduces equity to virtually zero is behaving perfectly rational. Because it cannot go bankrupt. It can only make profits. It's the for-profit only economy. But of course, from a systemic point of view, from an aggregate point of view, it's absolutely catastrophic because the industry as a whole becomes fragilized. As soon as one company goes bankrupt, cannot pay back all of its debt, and then the debt is what? Well, these are the assets of other banks and of other financial companies. Right? The amount of money that one bank owes to other people, it owes it to whom? To other banks and to other financial companies. So if one of them goes bankrupt, then it immediately spills over as a domino effect on all others. Right? So the financial industries become structurally weakened and ready to be blown away by financial tsunamis of the sort that we have witnessed in 2008. Therefore, monetary stabilization policies, precisely to the extent that they succeed, ultimately have a destabilizing impact on the economy as a whole. Stabilization policies are destabilizing. So, how to get out of the crisis? There's the Austrian solution. The Austrian solution is two-pronged. There's two elements. The first one is concerns the immediate task of getting rid of all of the debt. And Austrians typically recommend to let the market process work, that is no bailouts. And the consequence would, of course, be a financial tsunami. And the economy, the financial sector would be wiped away. After 3 weeks, no world bank would be standing. That is, the buildings would still be there. Right? But they would have all closed shop. No more financial firm, virtually it's all. And this would not be bad. Right? Of course, it would create a major adjustment problem in the short run. Right? There would be massive unemployment. Unemployment would soar up to 35, 45% or whatever.
To totally get out of the debt?
If you allow for financial meltdown of the market, so it would be a deflationary spiral, then not only the banks would go bankrupt, but all companies that are dependent on refinancing through banks. Okay. So what would happen in this case? What does it mean that a bank becomes bankrupt or a firm goes bankrupt? Well, it is liquidated. And liquidation does not mean cutting heads, but it means that the assets owned by the company, its buildings, its raw materials, its stocks and so on, are being purchased by somebody else. Or if they're not purchased, they're being taken over by somebody else. In the simplest of all cases, they're being taken over by creditors. And if you have given 80% of credits to a company, the company goes bankrupt, well then actually the entrepreneur can no longer pay you back. And so the company then usually belongs to you. That's the typical consequence in bankruptcy law. Okay. Otherwise it won't be sold on the market. But the point is, all these physical assets would not disappear. The buildings are still in place, the raw materials are in place, all the material goods, intermediary goods, the tools are in place. The people have not disappeared. It's not because the companies go bankrupt that the people who have been employed in those companies disappear, lose their knowledge and so on. They're still as competent as before. So what happens then is that there are new owners who come to own the company at zero debt, right? There's a 100% equity economy. And this process, of course, takes a while, right? So they need to find new markets, need to see, well, who can actually buy our products and so on. So this takes a while. It can take anything, well, for major crises of this sort, anything between 18 months and 3 years. And if we look at last crisis, so it's a major crisis, with long unemployment and so on. But then the economy restarts from there, reboots, without any debt. And then, of course, banks prop up and start lending credits anew and so on. And which brings us to the second point. The second point is to prevent that such a crisis be repeated again in the future. Now, what has led us into this situation? It's the institutional setup. We have a central bank that produces an immaterial money in potentially unlimited amounts, and this creates moral hazards for all market participants. So in order to avoid that the same thing, the same boom-bust sequence plays out again in the future, we have to change the institutional environment. We have to get rid of monopoly central banks. Okay. Take away their privileges from them. Allow for currency competition, for example. Or, alternatively, it's the second best solution, link our money again to gold or to silver, to some commodity. And if a country uses a gold standard, then it's not possible to bail out the banks, because you cannot produce gold as much as you wish. And it's precisely the point. It's not a disadvantage that gold is costly to make, it's its biggest advantage. It cannot be produced at will. Right? So this introduces responsibility. Moral hazard disappears, or in any case it's minimized. So this would be the Austrian solution. How to get out of the crisis? Through the market process. Let entrepreneurs sort this thing out. Governments at best can take obstacles out of their way, abolish minimum wage laws, things like this. The last thing, and I'm running out of time, I know, is how to create another Great Depression. Well, but this is very simple. You simply do what our governments have been doing the past 3 years. Right? Prevent that companies go bankrupt, try to bail them out, save them in the short run. It's all short run policies. Create new obstacles, regulate the markets more, make them less efficient. And this eternally, there's always a short-term solution without ever addressing the fundamental problems. So we're building up a huge mountain of debt that is starting to suffocate the economy, and the true problems are not being addressed. So we slip into a great depression. So these are our choices, they're a hard choice to make. And well, as for myself, maybe it's because I'm still relatively young, not as young as you are, and so on, but I still feel that I could get through deflationary spiral. That would be hard, but I prefer to have it hard in the short run and then be optimistic in the middle and longer run. And especially one good thing, second good thing about this is it is least hard on average people, that is people without much capital. The main source of income of an average person is his labor. Right? So labor is always needed, right? Even in a deflation, if the economy has melted down in an deflationary collapse, labor will eventually get needed. So the people who get hit most are people who have accumulated monetary savings, okay, financial savings. Not much of this will be lost. And the third big reason is that actually this type of solution, the deflationary meltdown, hits all the right people. It hits the bankers. Right? And it hits governments, which is also a good thing. So, and this is of course then the royal way to escape from monetary slavery. This is the road to freedom, this is the road to serfdom. Everyone is. I cannot demonstrate you scientifically that you have to choose this one here. But the reason for which
I think you can, but there is no time.
Okay, I guess I'm done.
Really well.
Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry it took me so long, but